if he woke up this morning and had all his vision back, today would be the best day of his life if he had all of his vision. But yet today I woke up with all of mine. I woke up with my hearing. I woke up with my body working, but yet what, today's not a great day for me? Yeah, it gives me a perspective of being grateful for my faculties, right? For my health, and really puts any of my complaints in perspective.
Kipp, what's up, man? So great to see you. We were talking taxes before we hit record, and now both of us are in a bad mood.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm impressed that you're doing your taxes right now.
Oh, no. Taxes for 2023 we're finalizing.
Got it.
So don't be impressed.
I was like, man, you're like getting ahead of it. Our profit and loss is already figured out.
A year behind it.
Got it. Yeah. Well, no. I don't think I've done my taxes on time for probably, I don't know, 5-10 years. I've always had to extend. It's always a mess.
Yeah.
It's
I'm going to do it right this year, though, because most people don't know this. You were saying that if they're W-2 employees, they're never going to know because the taxes just get taken from their check and they see what their net take-home pay is. But when you're an entrepreneur, you are writing that check out yourself. And not only are you writing it out yourself, you have to write it out quarterly. Yeah. If you don't write it out quarterly, then you get hit with interest and penalties. So that's part of what I'm paying now. So I'm going to make sure we do it right this year and get everything paid as it should have been paid. And hopefully we don't have to get dinged with an extra, we'll just say thousands of dollars, we'll say.
Unnecessary.
Five or 4 times. So yeah, anyways, there it is. Well, we're going to do this a little different today. I'm going to ask you questions. This is the very first podcast of the year. This is going to be released on January 1st, 2025. So very first podcast of the year. I'm begrudgingly noticing a trend that more and more people like to hear more about what you have to say on the Ask Me Anything than I do. So I figured let's give the people what they want. We'll talk about that today.
Hardly. I'll tell my mom to stop sending you messages.
Yeah. She's like setting up alter ego and fake accounts, all these people.
Yeah, totally.
Normally we do announcements. I don't think we have any announcements, but I did want to do a call out, and I wanted to bring this up because I mentioned it briefly. It was probably a month or so ago about something Andrew Huberman is doing that I really appreciate. Do you remember me talking about this?
I remember us talking about it, and you're like, remind me, Kipp, to bring that up.
Yeah, and I
totally forgot to remind you.
Well, people know if they've been listening to the podcast, and you know, I like Andrew Huberman. I think he's an intelligent person. I think he's got a lot of great information to share. I'm not as smart as him, so when I hear it, I'm like, this is all foreign to me, and it's 2 hours of a foreign language or longer that I can't understand. He must have heard me say that, though, because he started doing on his podcast, it's called, I think, The Essentials, and it's usually about 30 to 40 minutes of a in-depth, broad topic that he narrows it down to the relevant and pertinent information. And I'm like, there you go. That's what I can handle, which has been really cool. I was listening to one. The reason I wanted to bring it up, I thought this was fascinating. I think sometimes guys like Huberman and other Jordan Peterson and other intellectuals explain concepts that common sense already tells us is true, but there's always a little bit of information that you can get from it. And I think the way my brain works is I don't need all the details, all the intricacies, all the ins and outs. Does it work? Why does it work? Got it. Do it. But not everybody's like that. But he was talking about plasticity in the brain, neuroplasticity, which is a fascinating subject to me. If you don't know what it is, it's basically the brain's ability to adapt and adjust and pivot. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So he was talking about where, when you become an adult, how slowly your brain rewires itself relative to when you're a child. When you're a child, it happens really fast. You pick up on feedback and your brain and synapses change quickly. But when you're an adult, it's significantly longer. It's kind of like the old adage, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of that adage. But they did some studies, a colleague of his, and they had people wear these prism glasses, and there'd be, for example, a pen on the desk, and the prism glasses would make it look like the pen wasn't where it is, but 7 or 10 or 15 degrees off. And then he would tell people, reach for the pen and pick it up, and they'd miss it. They'd miss it. And over time, they'd gradually learn where it is and very quickly start to make those adjustments. But the few things that I thought were interesting was, number one, he said that the best factor or the most important factor for neuroplasticity is making mistakes.
Yeah.
It's making errors. It's being frustrated with not getting it right. That is your brain's mechanism for telling you something's not working. We need to make a new wiring or new connection because this is not working. And he said that the people who have the aptitude for perseverance through frustration are the ones who can hardwire their brains the fastest and the most effectively over time. He also said that because adults take longer in developing neuroplasticity and new habits, new routines, new thought ideas, that you can accelerate that as an adult based on the stakes. So when they did the study, they had these individuals do the pen thing, but there's no real stakes to that. But then they did the study and said, okay, you can eat only after you get this right. And when eating was thrown into the equation, the neuroplasticity, the ability to do it faster, picked up that much quicker too, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. So the stakes at which you're playing, your ability to make mistakes and be okay with it. And then he also said, as an adult, that you have to make incremental changes. It's very hard. They put those prism glasses on, and it's very hard for someone to change if the pen is off by 45 degrees or whatever it might be. But if the pen is off by 7 degrees and then 14 degrees and then 20 degrees and then 40 degrees and so on, we're able to adapt better if it's incremental changes, which leads us to a lot of the things we're already doing in our battle plan.
Yeah.
We're not telling guys to solve all their problems as quickly as they possibly can. We're saying just take one thing, just one thing. We're going to work on this one thing. Do everything else the same, but work on this. When you get that wired, and it does wire, then we can move on to the next thing. So I think it just kind of supports a lot of the work that we've been doing that I believe we've just intuitively known, but it's cool to know the data and the science behind it.
Yeah, I love that. I picked that up from him a few months ago. He was doing an episode on what he called, it's the same thing. Stress is an enhancer, right? With a growth mindset. If you have a growth mindset and you involve stress, your ability to change and learn skyrockets. And it's interesting. He didn't say this, but I've come to my own thought process around this. Growth mindset with stress, not just stress all by itself. And I think it's fascinating because when you start looking at your childhood, did stress generate change for a lot of us? Absolutely. Is the stress or the change always positive? The answer to that is no. Sometimes the lessons learned aren't good lessons.
Right. Yeah, true.
They're defining moments that we get to live with as adults. So the growth mindset being involved with it is what's critical, right? Stress in itself is an enhancer. Yes, but an enhancer of what?
For what?
Bad, negative self-talk and self-confidence, or an enhancer for growth. And the growth mindset is what? The belief in one's individual to rise above, to continue to learn and get better, right? And so that mindset is critical with the stress. You could just have the stress, and now we're learning all kinds of things that are enhancing us, but they may not be to our benefit.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would add to that is the stakes. So you have the growth mindset, the stress, and then the stakes at which you're playing. And the interesting thing I think about it anyways is that you can manufacture the stakes.
Yeah.
For example, if you're like, going to the gym is hard, and do this on a consistent basis, I'm literally putting I'm shaving years off of my life. Those are greater stakes. That causes the change to happen quicker and more effectively.
Totally. I love it.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, let's jump into questions. I wrote all of these questions down. I did not solicit any of these questions from everybody. These are questions I've wanted to ask you. Some of them are fun. Some of them are interesting, maybe thought-provoking, and some of them might be a little bit sensitive. So let's get into it.
Let's go.
My first question, why are you the way you are?
What's wrong with me, you mean?
Exactly. We'll get into that. We'll break that down a little bit more throughout the episode. All right, here's the first real one.
Okay.
Who is your favorite child and why?
Oh, man.
I'm
not going to answer that question either because my kids listen every so often.
All right, I'm going to get you some real ones here.
Oh, yeah,
right?
sure. I trust you now because the last two questions, you said that. So,
all right, here we go. Complete pivot. Do you have any lingering contention and animosity towards your ex-wife? And if so, what is it and how have you dealt with it?
No.
Really?
No, I don't. I did, right, for a long time. Absolutely. A term I like to use, I had a heart at war towards her. Mm-hmm. I felt that our approaches of whether to stay married or to get divorced, that we weren't aligned. There's areas that I felt like at the time she didn't handle it well, threw me under the bus, maybe looked bad. I had all these stories that I did have animosity towards, but absolutely not anymore. And luckily not anymore, because it doesn't serve her and it doesn't serve our kids for me to have any of those feelings towards her. And to be really clear, I'm not saying I'm pretending like, oh, I just pretend everything's okay. Actually, no, I think I finally got to the point where through empathy, I chose to love her and appreciate her and have some empathy around her circumstance and the tough job that she had as a mom, and realizing that a lot of the burden and suffering that we think are at the hands of other individuals are often them just dealing with their own circumstances. And there's a lot of stuff I took personal that I shouldn't have taken personal. And so, no, not at all.
Was there a pivotal moment where, I'm not sure it was like a hallelujah type moment, but was there a moment that you can remember where you thought, oh my gosh, I'm not angry or upset or frustrated anymore?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a particular moment. I would say this, though. As long as I held on to trying to fix things or get back together with her, I still had motive. And that motive was to like win her back or to do something, and it was selfish. And so it wasn't really, like I would say when I let her go, like really truly let her go and be okay with our marriage being over, that wasn't, until I did that, I wasn't whole and complete with the situation, because I had alternative motives still, trying to manipulate her or hope that she's going to like me, or, you know what I mean? Other things. And it wasn't until I really let go that I was kind of whole and complete. But fairly early on, I realized I was being a victim. I was blaming her for everything. I was taking zero accountability. And I got to that, I say this, I'm like, I got to that point fairly quick, probably 4 years post-divorce. It took years for me to really be okay with her being her.
Interesting. Yeah. All right, next question. If you could never do jiu-jitsu again.
Nope.
But you could choose any other martial art. Yeah, nah, I'm out. But you could choose any other martial art, just one. What would it be?
Muay Thai.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you like about Muay Thai? Obviously, heavier striking. Muay Thai is basically kickboxing with knees and elbows, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's the most practical. I may get grief for this. I think it's the most practical stand-up out of them all, right? Use of all 6 points, knees, elbows, great kicks, has some great boxing feints. I think it's an amazing martial art.
Do you train Muay Thai at all right now?
Not right now. I have in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not? Just because you want to focus heavy on jiu-jitsu, or have you thought about rounding that out?
Oh, I totally thought about rounding it out still. Like I would love to do some
Just
Muay
a
Thai.
time thing
Yeah.
or what?
Yeah, time. If I had to choose. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there it is. You have spoken. Kipp has
Muay
spoken.
Thai.
Jiu-jitsu is best. Muay Thai is second best. All right. Who would win if it was Kipp at peak Muay Thai performance and Kipp at peak Jiu-Jitsu performance? Who would win that fight?
Well, if we go to the self-defense element, the jiu-jitsu guy would, because I would just walk away.
No. Okay, cute and clever, but give me a real answer. You guys are in an altercation. There's a fight. There's peak Muay Thai Kipp, peak Jiu-Jitsu Kipp. Who wins?
I think jiu-jitsu wins. Wait for the kick, shoot in, take him to the ground.
Grab his leg, take him to the ground. Yeah. Hopefully you just don't get hit too hard before that happens,
Yeah,
essentially.
just don't get knocked out. Yeah.
Yep. All right. This one's a bit of a sensitive one, so let me know how you feel about it. So
Okay.
you have a son, and I'm using this term. You can use a different term if you want, or maybe there's something more appropriate. But you have a son with a degenerative physical disability. Is that how you would? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Obviously, that weighs heavy on him, but how does that weigh on you personally? And what types of conversations do you have with him, since you don't fully know what it's like to go through what he's going through?
Yeah. To give some context, so he has Usher syndrome. At birth, he failed his hearing test. Within a couple months as an infant, he had little hearing aids. So our mindset from a parenting perspective was, we have a kid that's deaf. And back in the day, you would think deaf is like you hear or you don't hear. Deaf is actually a spectrum. And so he's legally deaf, but he has hearing. And if he uses his hearing aids, he can hear, right? But it's still bad, right? Like you're still
It's
like
different,
yelling at
right,
him and
sure,
stuff. Yeah. And then roughly, I think when he was about maybe 12 or 13, we noticed that he was like tripping on things, especially at nighttime, really easily. Had his eyes checked, and his retina is failing him, and it's getting worse and worse. And then that raises a red flag, like, oh, this is a genetic thing, because when hearing loss and vision both are degenerative, that's usually Usher syndrome is what it's called. And the vision typically doesn't become an issue for most people with Usher syndrome until they're like in their 30s. So my son getting this at 13 was obviously devastating to him, but like even doctors were like, you have 6 months and it might be lights out. So luckily for him, it hasn't been as aggressive as we thought, but he's probably down to about 5% vision right now. So if you were having a conversation with him, he can look at your eyes or your mouth. That's how small, and just think of it as like the whole of the donut's getting smaller and smaller, and all peripherals non-existent, right? And so so he has vision loss. So back to your question. What was the first part of that? How do I deal with it? Sorry.
Well, I said it weighs heavy on him. That's obvious,
Yeah.
you know. And so I really want to hear how that weighs on you as a father and as a man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as a parent, all you really want for your kids is for them to have a good life, right? And to experience life and to find happiness and peace and joy, and grow and find fulfillment in their lives. And so by default, when we first found out, and even now, it eats at you that there's an experience of life that he won't get to his experience ever, right? Now certain elements, like he will be, but but it's limited, and it comes with a burden. There's some big things that cross my mind, like Will he get married? Is a girl that's going to choose to marry him, she's signing a big responsibility, more than most women ever will. And,
Yeah, sure.
and will that deter women from wanting to be with him and to marry him? I'm fearful of the morning or the day I get a phone call where he says, Dad, I woke up this morning and I can't see anything anymore. I hope that never happens. But I feel like that scares me. And there's a sense of, and he might even deal with it better than I would, but I think there's a sense of loneliness in that experience. And no one's experiencing it with him, just him. And so that kind of breaks my heart to think about him going through that. And ironically, like, the burden on me, are you joking? Like, what do I have to complain about?
Yeah.
So if anything, what helps me, and I've used this analogy a little bit, but if he woke up this morning and had all his vision back, it would be the best day of his life, probably. Today would be the best day of his life if he had all of his vision. But yet today I woke up with all of mine. I woke up with my hearing. I woke up with my body working, but yet today's not a great day for me.
Gives you a perspective.
Yeah, it gives me a perspective of being grateful for my faculties, right? For my health. And really puts any of my complaints in perspective.
Yeah. What types of conversations are you having with him? The way I framed the question was knowing that you don't, to your point just a second ago, you don't have to deal with that. You don't know fully what it's like to be in his shoes. So what types of conversations are you having around that? And still realizing, I don't really know because I'm not in your shoes. I've never been there before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't feel like many people could deal with his circumstance the way he can. I really don't.
Do you think he was born with the characteristics or whatever it is that make him able to deal with that? Or is that something he's learned because of the disabilities he has?
I think it's him losing his hearing when he's younger set him on a path of having to deal with something that he could have easily claimed as unfair and all these other things, but he chose not to. And so I think it did prepare him to deal with his vision later on. I think he's a very spiritual young man. He's a saint in many, many ways. And so I think it's probably a combination of his personality, but also a combination of his condition that has really helped him rise to the occasion. And I really don't feel a lot of people would. Like, if I compare him to our other kids, and they know this, if they had the same condition, they would not handle it even close to as well as he's handled it. So he has an aptitude and an eternal perspective that really has allowed him to deal with his circumstances.
Well, I imagine it's in his circumstance. I don't know, how could I? But I imagine it would be significantly harder than if somebody was just born completely deaf and completely blind or blind. Like, it would be, I don't want to say easier. That's not the right way to look at it. Maybe it's just harder knowing what you've had and you're losing that,
Yeah. And I think the fact that the vision has been slower has really allowed him, it's been decreasing. Like, I mean, how long has it been? For 8 years, it has gotten a little worse, a little worse, a little worse. And so the gradual worseness has not made it like black and white, like, oh my gosh, I lost all this vision. If you asked him today, is it worse today than it was yesterday? He'd say no. And the answer to that would be no for the last 8 years. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
so that has helped him get into it, I think, a little bit as well.
Yeah. I imagine there's a day, hopefully in the not too distant future, where he would be able to put on a pair of glasses that would basically sync with his brain, and the glasses would be cameras and the brain would be reading the images that are coming through the camera. I don't think that's too far-fetched. I think that's probably not that far away for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And back to your question, because I think it was a good one. I want to make sure it gets addressed. You know, conversations with him have always been, don't let your situation dictate how you show up. And he's been great from that perspective. You know, I've gotten in trouble with his mom for letting him drive and all kinds of things. Primarily just because I'm like, his vision's going to get worse, and you know, I'm going to let him drive. I don't care. You know, now not anymore. It's bad enough that it'd be reckless. He'd kill us all. But when he was younger, when he was like 13, absolutely. Because I realized that was going away. He still skis. We went skiing last year. So, you know, blind guy on the ski slopes plowing down the mountain. Now he wears a vest that says blind skier, you know, and I kind of, and I stay in front of him to try to like eliminate any obstacles that might be coming his way. So it's great. He's still living life, still doing things. We went ice skating last week, you know, and he was nervous about it because it's dark outside. So his vision's almost like 100% gone in dusk and dark. But he still got on skates and I skated. And so he's still living life.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, another pivot here. If Order of Man was your business and you could do whatever you wanted to do with the organization, what's the first thing you'd either change about the way that we do it or add to what we do?
Yeah, put me on the spot here.
I am, man. I got a lot of these that are on the spot. No, I want to know the truth.
I mean,
I'd want to know. I value your opinion. So
yeah, we've talked about this. I think it's been highly valuable for men to meet. You know, when we used to do those meetups, we would have guys rally on teams to try to get their whole team there, and that was special.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys on these teams go out of their way and have events across the nation. They fly in, they make things happen so they can see each other. I think we could facilitate that better. I would love to get to a point where when you join the Iron Council, based upon your geographic location, you get 4 teams to choose from based upon that geographic. So then that way, when we do an event in that region, the probability of that team being there skyrockets. And I would regionally assign people to teams just to help promote that possibility.
We could probably do that now. We could just start a team, and I want to find the most densely populated areas of the United States initially for the Iron Council, and then start a team based on that region.
Yeah.
So good. I like that. I think we're on the same page there. If you could change one physical, one mental, and one emotional characteristic about yourself, what would it be?
One physical. Well, just here, we'll go through each of them. Physical characteristic? Oh, man.
Better looking?
Yeah. I mean,
stronger?
A smaller Sorensen forehead? I don't know. No, I wouldn't mind. It's getting harder and harder as I get older to keep my strength where it is. And so I wouldn't mind being stronger. I don't wish. I feel like I could. Yeah, I mean, I could still make that happen, right? Like, I don't think it's like outside of my control. I don't know. Maybe keep my hair maybe a little bit longer. I'm assuming it's on its way. All my brothers are. I have 5 brothers. All of them are bald for the most part.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the fact I have any hair is a miracle in itself. So, yeah, I don't know. Mental. I would say to myself, or what I wish for myself is what I wish for all people, and that is to truly realize their potential. I would love to know that, to know what's possible, to have better confidence in one's ability and impact in the world. I think if
That's
I
interesting.
knew that,
If you knew, then that makes you kind of question, if you did know that, would you do your life? You'd obviously do your life differently, right? You'd live it more boldly, I would think.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think so too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Unless your potential was like, oh, your potential from here is just shit. So
yeah, clarity.
Good luck.
Your potential. You really don't have any
You don't
potential
have
yet.
any.
So I'm
You're
assuming.
there.
Yeah, I'm assuming
maybe you
my
already
potential.
reached your max. Maybe
Yeah,
you
that would-
peaked, Kip.
That would be depressing. Actually, you're like, hey God, could you show my potential? You're like, actually, you did better than I thought you would do. You've
You've already seen it. You've already seen it. It happened 10 years ago. You remember that? That's what it was.
Yeah, you're on your way down the hill now.
All right. How about emotional? Anything you'd change about your emotional attributes, characteristics?
I take things too personal sometimes. If and that's why I like For Agreement so much, because I need it. I realize how. Let me ask you this question, because I really do feel this way for me. When I'm in a good mood, like I'm happy. When I'm happy, anything can happen in those circumstances. Like, I don't know, someone could call me a dipshit. You could be mad at me. My wife could be mad at me. And my ability to deal with those circumstances is super effective, because I'm not taking it personal, and I feel great. And so I can resolve, I can show up better. I could do all those things better. But when I'm taking things personal, man, I'll take something that is minor and make that shit way more serious than it should be. And it doesn't benefit me, and it doesn't benefit anybody else.
Let's stay on the same vein. I had another.
Is that the same
another
way
question
with you?
here.
Do you feel that same way?
No, I don't take things personally.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I ever have. And yeah, I don't think I ever have. And I think I'm actually pretty good at getting over things if I feel slighted or upset, or if I do happen to take something personally. Yeah, I can usually compartmentalize it pretty well.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Wish I had some.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing. I can't find the question in here, but it was something like, if you could take your worst flaw that you think it is, whatever that is,
Okay.
and you could trade it in, like you could get rid of it completely.
Okay.
But you had to pick up another, what we would generally consider a flaw. What would you trade for what?
Oh man, I don't know if I'd trade. I mean, even in this circumstance, take things personal. Guess what that is? Allows me to have some wicked empathy. More than probably, I think, more than the average individual. And so even in saying this thing that is a flaw of mine, I see how it can be a superpower. You know,
that's a good perspective. I like that perspective.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I'd trade it, right? Because I think I'm just going to trade another, you know what I mean? I lose some superpower with that trade. And luckily I've learned to take advantage of that and use my ability to be empathetic to my advantage. And I think it's one of my benefits around my different positions is my ability to be empathetic.
Yeah, you know how to utilize that weapon already.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's kind of a fun, interesting one. If Jesus Christ was walking on the earth today and he asked to spend the day with you, but he wanted to learn from you, not you learn from him, he wanted to learn from you, what would you teach him?
Arguably the most perfect person that's ever walked the earth wants to learn something.
It might not be, look, it might not be a lesson necessarily, but maybe you want to teach him something or show him something cool or go on a cool experience, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Maybe get on the mats. See.
I knew you were. That's what I was thinking.
See what kind of jiu-jitsu juices has. You know what I mean? Like, does he get triggered a little bit? He threw away turned over tables and yelled at people. So maybe I'd try to push his buttons on the mat, piss him off, and say, "Hey, hold on. Is this anger like Satan anger, or is this like Jesus anger happening here? You know,
righteous anger or unrighteous." The thing about it, when you talk about jiu-jitsu, it's always chess, right? Everybody says it's like chess. The problem is he knows everything, so he already knows exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, where you're going to put your hand, where you're vulnerable.
Yeah, he probably has some voodoo jiu-jitsu that we haven't invented yet, right? And so I'd be like, learn some stuff from him. I'm being serious. Like I'd roll with him. The other thing that is a kind of a passion of mine over those last couple of years, and I find this fascinating. I can nerd out on this. What you've been in this experience, I'm sure, Ryan, at certain points in life when you've gotten training, it sticks. In other cases, it doesn't stick.
Oh, totally.
And there's been times where my paradigm has, and I'm using this term, but my paradigm has shifted. Like I walked away and I'm like, I am a different person. I see the world differently. That's like amazing, right? And in scripture, right, Christ had the title of master teacher. And so in a corporate America environment, I'm like, all right, master teacher, Mr. Perfect. So what is the perfect learning and development strategy? How do you teach people in a way that allows them to learn and grow in no other way possible? What is that? Right? And I would love to nerd out with Jesus around Bloom's taxonomy, the different levels of comprehension and understanding and learning, the concepts of parables. I don't know, like all of it. I would totally enjoy that conversation from a I'd nerd out.
I've got a lot of questions, so I'm just trying to pick out the right ones for the sake of time here. Okay, here I don't generally like false dichotomies. You know that. But that being said, they are good thought experiments. They're good questions to provoke some thought. And there may not be an answer, but it's worth considering. So here's my false dichotomy. What is more important, to be moral in your day-to-day dealings with everyone, or protect and provide for your family if it meant that you had to be immoral to do it?
Moral, day-to-day.
More over protecting and providing for your family. Okay, that's different than I would say personally. So why do you say that?
Because I think that's the long game.
Like more the eternal game?
Yeah, and it's the eternal game, but it's also, I think it's the game that actually proves out. So I think there might be a lot of tendency in our lives that I'm forced. My current circumstance is whatever. I got to win in this circumstance, so I'm going to make a tactical victory that compromises integrity and morals. And often those choices require an additional questioning of integrity tomorrow and the day after, and like when do you call it? But I actually do feel that when we're morally focused, when we're in integrity day in and day out, things kind of work out. Eventually.
I think so,
and
too.
I might lose the battle today, but it's going to be fine. People will rally. People will see your honor. People will come to your aid. All these other things align. And it's funny, some religions, what do they call that? Karma, right? But give it whatever label you want. I think strategically, that will always win in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And that's why it's this false dichotomy, because I agree with what you're saying. But also, if, let's say my family's starving and I needed to go shoot a deer, but I don't have a deer license, I'm going to go shoot the deer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or I have to choose between a stranger and my kids, like I'm going to choose my kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there, and I know that, and that's why this is that kind of that weird thought-provoking exercise, but it is interesting to consider how far you would go to protect and provide for your family. Like what everybody says, oh yeah, I'd do anything. Well, what exactly do you mean? There's a couple of guys that I've heard, and this makes a ton of sense to me. I think I first heard it from one of my friends. He's a fitness trainer, Josiah Novak. And I think I saw something like, you say you do anything for your family, but you're not willing to diet and go to the gym to be a better father, to lead them well. I'm like, damn.
Yeah. You're not willing to live for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Totally.
Okay. Let's see. I got that one. I wrote this. Is there any legitimate reason for a man to drive a car instead of a truck?
It depends if it's a stick shift and if it goes really fast.
Fair. That's fair. Okay. So there is. So you're saying yes.
Yeah,
so that's absolutely a good point. There's the exception.
And anyone that says otherwise, they haven't had a chance to ride in a Ferrari on a racetrack.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't think about that, but that's fair. Years ago, I took my two oldest boys down to Las Vegas, and we went to the racetrack where you can test drive cars and all that stuff. Anyways, my second son's really into cars. He wanted to do the drifting, so it was this Dodge Charger or Challenger, I don't know what it was, and it was all black. And so we get in the car, and the lady's like getting us all settled in, and the driver's already sitting in the car. He just pulls up, and she's like, all right, well, once you put your seatbelt on, like, he goes.
Yeah.
When he sees that click, he goes. And I'm like, okay. So the boys get their seatbelts on. I put my seatbelt on, and he goes and just takes off. And the seatbelt pops out. I didn't put it all the way in. So I'm like trying to get the seatbelt to go, and it won't go because we're drifting. Awesome. So now the seatbelt is all locked up. I can't even put it on. But it was incredible. So there's a bunch of people on the racetrack that are driving, test driving, things like that. He was drifting around the people driving their car, not just drifting around corners,
on the inside,
drifting around them. It was amazing to see that skill and the experience of it. It was really cool.
Yeah. I'm sure you had a permanent smile on your face. First time I've been on a racetrack, I drove actually a Ford GT, if anyone knows cars.
Oh yeah.
I was lucky enough to drive one of those cars, but I went on some racetracks with some Ferraris, and the whole time, man, my mouth was sore from smiling because it was so fun. Yeah, it's a blast.
It is so fun. All right, if you could mirror, not be, but just mirror one historical figure, flaws and all, who do you think that would be? Is there a figure that sticks out in your mind to you?
George Washington.
That's my knee-jerk reaction is that too, but why do you say that?
So I've read a lot around George Washington, right? And so the things that came out that I've learned about him that I really admire is, one, he was very assertive individual. He wasn't passive in any way. He was bold. He was very religious and very spiritual man. I love the fact of the level of his humility with that boldness. I love that aspect of him. That multiple opportunities, he literally served his country in a position of authority, and he didn't want it, but was willing to do it for the greater good. And I don't think, give me a politician that operates from that perspective.
Yeah.
Right? He's our first president that never ran for president.
Well, he probably could have been made a king.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I just find it amazing. So yeah, his boldness, but his humility. And from my understanding of him, he was very caring, but he also held people accountable. and expected them to show up powerfully as well. But he did it from a caring perspective.
There's another interesting thing about getting people to show up. Like he was notorious for the way people looked and the way they kept their environments, the way they kept themselves. And even with him, you could see how incredibly and impeccable his uniforms were, and really believed in the power of looking good so that you show up and you live your life well.
Totally. Yeah.
I had the chance to see, I think, like his wooden teeth, actually. And I think it was in DC or somewhere where you could actually see his teeth. It was pretty interesting.
Crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And there's something else I was going to add is his willingness to sacrifice too. Like really think about what he put on the table. I mean, he was a soldier for Great Britain. Turncoat. Went against all of that for an ideal. Holy crap. Right? Like when you look at the founding fathers and literally what they sacrificed to sign their names on that paper, it's unreal to me. Unreal.
You know what's interesting, though? I think about this sometimes. Let's just hypothetically say, same scenario, but Great Britain wins that war. All of us would be, we would not be celebrating Thomas Jefferson, George Washington.
Their names would be cursed. Yeah.
We would think they were horrible, villainous, vile, repulsive people. Isn't that so?
Yeah.
I guess
the winners write
the history books.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Interesting. Here's a good one. If there were a Red Dawn situation, you just woke up in the morning, Red Dawn, what are the first three things you would do? And then secondary, what three areas are you deficient in and should shore up?
Okay. So Red Dawn, like boots on ground.
Boots on ground. You wake up, soldiers are coming down from parachutes, driving their tanks into town, like it's on.
Yeah. My first initial thought is grab our packs that are already packed and ammunition and head into the foothills where we can camp. We kind of have a spot that's not far from us, but it's a hike. It would give us higher ground. There's no coming to us from above, right? And so we'd be nestled and removed from the situation. That's almost the immediate thing I would do. Where areas of deficiency, I should probably have a cache already up there, and I don't. And so that would be a lot of stuff to be packing up. There is a survival rifle that's a 22. They call it a honey badger, or an A1. Is it an A1 or it's an A1.
A1 or A? Oh, so you said a 22, not a 9mm.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know then.
There's a rifle that it's a survival rifle that used in the military for pilots. It's super
really?
basic, yeah. And anyhow, I want something like that because that ammunition is a huge amount of ammunition, right? Way lighter to carry, lethal enough. Yeah, inexpensive, lethal enough that you could use it. It's quieter. So I don't have enough 22, and I don't have one of those cool survival rifles that I'd want. That's a 22. Yeah.
Do you feel like if that were to happen that you would try to lead or rally men together for a resistance?
Absolutely. But my first priority.
How would you do that?
Yeah, my first priority would be family out.
Your family, sure.
First.
Of course.
Yeah. I already know. I think I already know who all those guys are in my neighborhood. So I would immediately like, all right, what's our strategy? Like, what are we doing? And come up with a plan.
It's so crazy though, because so you go up to the foothills and we just think, oh yeah, I'd get those guys together. How are you going to, you don't have cell phones.
No.
Right. That's the first thing the enemy is going to do is disrupt communications.
Totally. And that's an area that I need to improve on a little bit. So I actually have unauthorized ham radios, a bunch of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and a couple of guys.
Unauthorized. What makes them unauthorized?
Well, you have to be certified to be able to use ham radios.
You have to have a license, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't. But I assume that in these kind of circumstances, I don't give a crap, right? So.
Least of their worries.
Yeah. There's a handful of guys that actually do tests monthly in my neighborhood on their ham radios. And I've chatted with them to start doing that with them, with my radios, but I haven't done that yet. But you would hope, right, that those group of individuals would start communicating on those ham radios appropriately.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. I hadn't really thought about that. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Pivot again. I got a couple more questions we'll do. If there were no constraints at all, no financial constraints, responsibility type constraints, what would you do for work?
I kind of love what I do.
Really? You would keep doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I would still, continue working with you in the IC in an order of man. I love the conversation of leadership. And it's evolved a little bit for me, right? I feel leadership is a choice that we can choose. And that choice is putting other people's success as a priority. Their growth and development and success as a priority. That's leadership. And if you're a parent, you're a leader. And then you can choose to be a leader, whether you have a title or not. And so that conversation is a fun conversation. I enjoy that conversation. I think it is the answer to us showing up more powerfully. Like in the grand scheme of things, we talk about like personal development and it's like, become a better person. That's all great. So you can be a better leader. Like, I think that's like the progression is any personal development should eventually evolve into effective leadership.
I like it.
And I have an avenue to do it in my current job. So I'd keep doing it. Right. And
that's good.
And the more I could take on, the better.
Because most people aren't that way where they'd be like, oh, I'd keep doing this. Like I would do this. Yeah. I would do the same thing, but most people would do something completely different.
Yeah.
They get out of it fast.
I would keep coming to the office, doing what I do, and just, I don't know, continue on the same path of trying to help.
Nice. All right. So I have two more questions. If there's one bit of feedback, constructive feedback that you've been wanting to give me, but never have for any reason, what would that be?
Oh man, that's a really good question. If you asked me it a couple of years ago, I would say that you're too stern. Sometimes in your thought process, it's always black and white with you. But we've talked about that, man. I feel the gains in the space of empathetic, like thought process on your part has been astounding. It's been great, actually.
I appreciate it.
So I would never give you that feedback anymore. But if that was feedback, I would have given you, you know what I mean, a couple of years ago. The other part, the one thing I would give you feedback, and my apologies, I probably should just not waited for a podcast to give you this feedback.
It's all right.
Yeah, but this is something I think is really important, and I think it's insightful for Iron Council, and I call it the equitable transfer of value. People will always show up powerfully as long as there's an equitable transfer of value. Mm-hmm. And the minute that's tilted, and I'm not getting as much as I'm giving, then what I do, most people will do one of two things. They'll reduce their effort to match what they get, or they'll just leave.
Right.
That's it. And I would advise you that from a leadership perspective in the IC, our first thought when we have maybe a disengaged battle team leader, for instance, let's say, I don't know, they're not showing up as powerfully, to immediately go to that and go, okay, hold on. Are they getting an equitable transfer of value of what I'm asking of them? Because that's usually where underperformance always comes in.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so I double down on making sure they're getting value. And our circumstance is different, right? Obviously, from the IC perspective, some of that might be, for most organizations, it's compensation, but not really, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of it is
something else,
intrinsic value. am I learning? Am I being challenged? Do I find purpose and meaning in what I'm doing? Am I getting reps where I'm growing in a way? Am I making a difference? The minute those things start going down and they're not getting those things anymore, they will reduce their effort always. And I think you're going to get to a point where size becomes enough where you're going to have to hire someone, right? That's like
to take care of, for sure.
To run so they have more meat in the game. They will give you more meat.
That makes sense. Cool. I like it. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Last question, Kipp, that I have for you here is, this one might be a little bit of an emotional one, but I want to bring it up. And like part of the reason that I wanted to do this, by the way, is because number one, I value your responses and value your insight and who you are and how you show up. And number two, it's good for guys to hear from us about how we think and what we would do differently, or how we ask questions, or what kind of questions we ask. Like, some of these questions are pretty sensitive. And the fact that you and I can have this type of conversation. Now, I know it's being recorded, but how many conversations can a guy have about some of this stuff with another man? It's not real likely.
Superficial.
So there's something to be learned and said there as well. So here's the question. If you could say one thing to your dad if he were still alive, what would you say to him?
I think I would tell him that I would choose him as my dad, and that and it sounds cheesy, but like really accept him exactly for the man he is. You know, and then I'd probably tell him all the things I was grateful for that he did, that he taught me, that he may not even realize that he taught me. And then I would probably double down and apologize for any areas that I showed up small, where I maybe withheld love from him because I took things too personal and assumed, right, that him not meeting my expectations in certain ways meant that he didn't love me. And I'd apologize for that. Ironically enough, you asked this question last night. I had this wave file, like a sound file on my desktop, and it's of my dad actually leaving me a voicemail. I saved it onto my PC. He's never, and I literally don't say this to like make him sound bad, but I think I wish I would have realized why he was doing this. But he wasn't a man to, call me and check in, right? Like that never happened with him. And roughly about, in fact, it was around this time of year, 3 years ago, he calls me and left me a voicemail. And that's the voicemail that I have on my computer that I listened to yesterday. It's the only voicemail I have from him. And he called and wanted to wish me a Merry Christmas. And, to give my kids and my wife a hug, let them know that he appreciates them. And then it was kind of funny because I bought him these ugly ass shoes, these stupid, well, they're stupid shoes for like to help your arches or something like that old people wear, Velcro even, like really ugly shoes. And the funny part is he called me up and said, "Hey, thanks for those shoes. They're a huge help and they've been great, whatever." Little did he know that I talked to my sister weeks earlier and said, "Hey, is Dad wearing those shoes?" She's like, "No, are you kidding? Like, I think he threw them away." He's like, "I'm not wearing those stupid things." And he put his boots back on. and so he calls me and leaves me a voicemail telling me thanks for these great shoes. And I'm like, no, he's not wearing those shoes,
That's funny.
Yeah, he's never worn anything but cowboy boots, you know what I mean? And so it was kind of funny that he used that as an opportune time. But I regret not seeing that for what it was. And what it was is my dad probably being present to his mortality and reaching out to me in his own way. And I didn't jump on that as much as I should have.
Yeah. It's good, man. Well, I had other questions too, like, but I decided to overlook them.
Just
like,
choose the ones that
if you
make
could
me
change,
cry.
well, like I was thinking, if you could choose one thing to change about Asia, what would it be and why? I decided you probably wouldn't answer that question.
Well, and I don't know if we have a long enough episode, right? You want to keep these within an hour.
I also put in here, how many times per day do you think, I wonder what Ryan's doing right now? Those types of questions.
Yeah. I mean, that happens all the time.
Kipp, I appreciate it, man. You gave some great answers to some questions here, and that was fun. Like, it's good to learn more about you. We've been friends for a long time, but it's still good to know your thought processes and why you do the things that you do. To go back to that first question, why you are the way you are, well, we answered some of that today, so that's cool.
Appreciate
Guys,
it.
we're going to go back to our regular scheduled program next week.
So don't stop listening just because we did this.
Don't stop listening, okay? It's just a one-off. I understand if you don't like it, don't leave. We'll never do it again. That's the only time I'm going to give Kipp the microphone like that. So just don't worry about it. Guys, real quick, one thing I do want to say is that on January 6th, so that's Monday night, January 6th, we have an Iron Council preview call at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that's, again, Monday, January 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern, Iron Council preview call. We had a really good call last week. We pulled back the curtain a little bit, shared a little bit about what the IC was about. Some guys shared some stories and some lessons that they've learned and how they've applied these lessons into their lives. And it was a really powerful call. So if you're on the fence and you're wondering, is it worth it? Do I want to pay money for this? What all is included? Go to theironcouncil.com/preview. theironcouncil.com/preview. You can join a wait list, drop your email in there, and then we will email you Monday morning, probably Friday night too, and remind you that we have that call Monday, January 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern, theironcouncil.com/preview.
Ryan, can I give them a challenge? Those guys that come on Monday, bring a problem. Like there's obviously a reason that you might be considering joining the Iron Council, right? It's like, well, I need to get my fitness in shape. I need to resolve some conflict in relationships or whatever that is. Bring it to the table. Hey, and like, how much would you appreciate this? Hey, Ryan, I've been considering the Iron Council. The key important element of my life that needs to be addressed is XYZ. How would the Iron Council help me resolve and or get on a path of resolving that issue?
Yeah.
Like, bring those to the table.
That'd be awesome.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that? Those men who come to the table with a problem and are willing to voice and express it are the ones who are going to get the most value out of the Iron Council anyways. Because, and I told these guys on the call last week, I said, look, if you want to get value out of this, then you need to start speaking up. You need to tell people what's wrong, what you're dealing with, what you're good at, what you're not good at, asking questions, being considerate of what other people might have to share with you. The more that you do that, and the men that do that inside the Iron Council are the ones who thrive and succeed, not just within the confines of what we've created, but in their life. That's the idea. I don't care about how well you perform in the Iron Council. Like, top performer in the Iron Council does nothing for me, but for you to be a better father or to be a better husband or to make a little more money this year or extend a little more grace where you haven't been so willing to do that in the past, or losing some weight, that means you're doing the work. And that's what I appreciate way more than I contribute a lot to the Iron Council. That's great. I love it. But let's see if we can translate it to your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Very first call of the year. Thought Kipp could kick that off. I loved your answers to those questions, Kipp. I know that was a little bit of a blindside for you. You didn't know what those questions were ahead of time, and you did pretty good. So appreciate you, man. All right, guys. We'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.